your shank, because they made it so small it had to fit inside here. It had to be 166.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which means they had to go to a smaller thread. Okay, so then you had that same weak point pivot point. Okay, and you also had it inside the arrow. So the broadhead or the arrow itself is not meant to take lateral pressure. Okay, so now let's apply this with a glue in. So now you're taking glue in and you're sliding it that far into your arrow. Okay, so where's your pivot point? Is it here or is it here? Well, if it's here, now you have this much structure of arrow in front of it.
What's going on, guys? Hope you are having a great Saturday already. And if you're tuning into this podcast after Saturday, hopefully you're having a fantastic day. I'm really excited to bring Dale to you guys. Dale Perry. He is the owner of Evolution Outdoors. They've come up with an awesome release called the Ibex. They have some other things in the works down the line, so keep an eye out for that. And also, it's the glue-in system that I'm going to run on my VAP TKOs this year for my heavier setup, the about 480 grain setup with the 4 millimeters arrow. And on the screw-in broadheads, I'm going to be running the mechanical and the fixed in my quiver as well at 125 grains. Guys, definitely want to go check it out. I'll leave the link down below for that. If you are one of those awesome people that continues to watch the videos, I really appreciate you. But most of you are not subscribed. And I'm giving a bow away at 10,000 subscribers. A fully set up bow with all the accessories from all the companies and partners that I work with. I'm going to be sharing with you fully set up and sent your way. And if you're local, you'll even come into Wild Arrow and get everything set up as well over there. So, subscribe. And thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. Last but not least, this episode is brought to you by BlackOvis. I'm going to leave the link down below. It helps support me, but also gets you a 10% discount on anything over there at BlackOvis. And sometimes that discount even stacks on blowout things that they have, whether it be 60% off certain apparel, 30% off here and there. Go check it out. BlackOvis is an amazing place to find all the equipment that you're going to want, from clothing to backpacks to boots to glass, everything in between. Go check it out, guys. Have a fantastic Saturday. And of course, get out, live your life, and love it.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the RedBeard Outdoors podcast. I've got an outstanding guest for you guys today. We've got Dale, and I was joking around about his title here. We're going to call him Dr. Death because he does Evolution Outdoors. He's got the Jekyll and Hyde broadheads that we'll get into. So, I mean, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, Dr. Death, it just goes all together there. But we might be having a new title for him coming up. But no, in all reality, Dale is just an outstanding individual. He loves the outdoors, loves hunting. He's looked at broadheads, has been in the broadhead game for a while, and he's come out with some amazing items that I recommend. I used them this last year in 2023, the two animals that I was able to get down. I used the mechanical broadhead that we'll go over and why I recommend it so much. But Dale, for people that don't know who you are, who are you?
Dale Perry. I'm the original designer of the Gravedigger broadhead. And I designed that. I started that, launched that company in 2012. Ended up selling that company in 2015 to Planos Energy. And in that, there were some things that I wanted to do to make that product better. So now I own Evolution Outdoors and now that name came up with it is an evolving thing. It's an ever evolving. You're always trying to make yourself better. And so I came out with the Jekyll and Hyde, and how that came about was I was going to make just a straight hybrid head like you used, and ended up saying, why couldn't we make this mechanical and fixed? Because that's what gives you the same impact points, is the ferrule design. So, and that's where it came. Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, it's one person, one ferrule, and it's two different personalities. So So that's it. But I've been doing this. I've been designing products, even in the golf game way back when. But I've been designing products. I started in 2010 and launched in 2012, and here we are today.
Yeah, no, for sure. So you're telling me, and this is just kind of sarcasm here, but you said you started developing products in 2010, launched in 2012. So that took you 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then I mean, what are we now? 2024. So
Correct.
14 years later, it's taken you 14 years to come out with this outstanding broadhead, the glue-in system that we're going to talk about. So I just want to point that out to people because there's so many people that are used to this overnight. They think there's this overnight success. This, you're going to think of an idea and it's just going to happen. That's not how it works. 14 years, guys. That is a long time to be working on and perfecting a product that you now obviously believe in. Lots of people have talked about it. I've used it. I'm a believer in it. And this is going to be the broadhead that I use in 2024. But I just want to highlight the fact that gets skipped over sometimes. So 14 years of work, research, use, field testing, all of this stuff for you to come out with this product that we have now with the glue-in system. So that's a big accomplishment in and of itself.
Yeah, the glue-in system has been a work in progress for quite some time. When way back when, and I'll say 2015, we looked at, right before we sold the company, we looked at a glue-in system because I'm a big proponent of the 166 4 millimeter arrows. And you've seen over the years everybody trying to come out with a new outsert system that works. Ethics has one, Victory has one, Black Eagle has one. I personally had one when I sold the company. And so it's a tough element, and the glue-in system is really the only way to do it to where it's super strong. That, I think that's what the downfall of Deep Six was. Deep Six was, you took the smallest part of your broadhead, the shank, and made it smaller. You made it a 632 thread, and arrows aren't designed to take lateral pressure; they're designed to take impact pressure. And so, in developing that and testing it and testing how the collars work and how they run in conjunction with the glue-in system, it's really mind-boggling how strong they are.
You've shot like concrete walls and stuff. I mean, talk about some of your testing that you do with your
Yeah,
stuff.
so some of the testing when we first started this out, we decided, okay, concrete walls. Nobody hunts a concrete wall. Moving on, right? I did
water
it when
buffalo's pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close. But I always believed that a broadhead should be able to survive that. Okay, it doesn't have to be okay. I can shoot it again, but it has to survive. It can't blow up. And there's a lot of broadheads on the market that blow up when you shoot them into a block wall. And so you want your broadhead to survive, hitting in the shoulder or whatever. Because if it gets through, a lot of guys shooting 80 pounds. The bows, you shoot 80 pounds. The bows today are efficient enough to get through a shoulder, as long as the broadhead holds up. And so when I decided to test the glue-ins, I took an arrow. Basically, this is the Victory VAP TKO, but I took an arrow and I took a broadhead and I just put it in like this. No collar, no nothing. And when I shot it into a block wall, it blew up about 2 inches of this arrow. It just mushroomed out. And it stuck in the block wall about that far. And so what I noticed is you lost all your kinetic energy going forward because the arrow disintegrated. So then I was shooting gold tips. So I used their knot collar that's in the back, if everybody's familiar with it. It's a super thin piece of metal. Put it on the front, shot it again. Used the same broadhead, shot it again. This time it blew up about 1 inch of the arrow, but it actually penetrated the wall about that far. So a little bit further because it carried the energy further. So then I took an actual collar, a lot like this one. I took it from a different system, cut it down. It was about that big, glued that in, and the arrow literally blew through the block wall. It just went right through it. Took it out, worked fine, spun fine, everything was good. So this collar, its job has nothing to do with concentricity because the broadhead itself is what does that. But it kept the arrow from expanding, which allowed all the energy to transfer forward, better penetration. So that's when we decided you have to have a collar. I mean, you really do it, and that's the key part of it because it keeps your arrow from expanding. And we just, they're not big. These are aluminum. They're 10 grains, and then we have a steel one somewhere. A steel one, and it's just 30 grains. They're not. It doesn't help strength wise because this one won't ever break, but it just gives you a different weight option. So yeah, and I ended up shooting the same broadhead, heat treated, 416 stainless, 6 different times into the wall, and you can still shoot that broadhead.
Wow.
So yeah, that's how it all came, and there is obviously a downside to them. The downside is cost. They're twice as much to make because there's twice as much material, way more than twice as much machining. They have to be perfect. So that's one of the biggest things is cost, and people, it's hard to take, a dozen broadheads and a dozen, arrows at $200 a dozen and dedicate them to hunting. But more and more people are realizing that, that's your instrument. That's what you're going to kill an animal with, and it's worth the investment.
Exactly.
So
100%. Yeah, and just to that note, like I know you've put a lot of work and effort, and for those people out there thinking, again, a brick wall really or a concrete wall, like why would you do that? Well, it's you're overbuilding the product basically for preparing it for any scenario you could possibly encounter. I mean, you're not going to shoot
right.
into a concrete wall, but you might hit the scapula, which that's a whole nother discussion that I feel like people should aim back a little bit farther from the shoulder.
Yeah.
Stay away from the shoulder. You don't want bone fragments in your meat anyway. There's
Right.
plenty of vitals behind the shoulder. But anyway, that's another discussion. In case you are one of those people that hugs the shoulder, you want to have that ability to be able to get through. So just 2 of my scenarios real quick. This is one of the arrows. My whitetail arrow is hanging up back there on my bull. But you make, so these, we're going to talk about, we were just talking about the glue-in system, but I'm going to jump to the other product first, and then we'll go back to the glue-in system because this is how I got introduced to your broadheads. And I feel like a lot of people shoot 5mm or screw-in style broadheads.
100%. Yeah.
A little bit more than glue-ins because glue-in is definitely more of that higher end. If you're looking for more durability, less tinkering, you're not able to just like screw around with broadheads. It's you put it in, and that's your broadhead. But
yeah,
with this right
it's
here,
something for a setup that you're going to go with. 100%.
100%. Yeah, exactly. So we'll get to that in just a second. But for people that are out there wondering about, so this is a titanium insert, half cert, whatever, from MFJJ Podium Archer. But this right here is the
125.
125.
Yep.
Yeah, this is the 125 with a 2-inch cut, right?
Yep.
2-inch.
Yes, that's the hide.
Yeah, so this is the hide. So I always remember it like this. Dr. Jekyll, he's a little bit more clean cut. He's more standard. That's the fixed head, right? And I'll show you that one. And then the Mr. Hyde is the crazy one that just destroys everything. And so this right here, so there's different weights. I went with the 125 because that's what I had, sighted in for and everything. And then I folded this back up, but this went, I was telling Dale this, if I can zoom out here. It was about to here, buried in the dirt behind the bull. So it went clean pass through. You can see right here on the fletchings, clean pass through, and it was buried into the dirt about that far behind the bull. So it works. Mechanicals work. I didn't hug the shoulder, and it was a 70-yard shot. So And you can see the broadhead here. There's no dings. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just
which
good
is
quality.
impressive because one of the things with our heads, and I will 100% be honest with everybody, the way you're showing that. So when those blades come down, all the pressure is on that shelf. So it wants to take that blade, open them, one right
So I
here.
lied. There's a little bit of a ding right there on that
Okay.
edge.
So
But
it wants to take the blade. Yeah, it does. It wants to take the blade and all the pressure's right here. Which is if you were shooting, and we're going to reverse this a little bit. So let's pretend that this is the sharp edge and that's forward. If you're shooting a broadhead that rear deploys, there's no pressure right here. So if you were shooting this broadhead in this direction and it rear deployed, and this was the sharp edge, there's no pressure there because it can just fold up or hit the little tabs and comes back open. But when the blades come down and they land on this shelf, that's where you're cutting bone, you're cutting all that stuff. All the pressure's right here. So we can't make these blades super hard like a hard knife would be, to where they retain an edge super good, because they become brittle. The harder they are, the more brittle they are. We want these blades to bend, flex. If it hits something hard and it has to bend, then let it bend. But it's still doing its job as it goes through the animal. And so, we recommend, shoot an animal and replace the blades. Or like you do, or like I do, I just kind of retire the arrow. It's kind of like, if you make a great shot in golf, you can retire your golf ball.
yeah.
But those are the things that, the ferrules shouldn't bend. They're all hardened. Our 100 grain ferrules are 70-75 aircraft aluminum, because we can't make 100 grain broadhead out of steel. There's just not enough material. It becomes too heavy. So,
And that's the other thing too for me. So I know, again, this is just me overthinking it, but I went, I've always shot the 125s because I like a little bit more weight up front. There's not as many options as 100 grain, but I'm okay with that for the options that I like anyway. But I also like the fact that this is steel rather than aluminum for the ferrule. I don't like aluminum ferrules on my broadheads. That's just personal preference. Some people are okay with that. Yours do amazing from what I've seen. People that I know and I trust their opinions use them and love them. But the 125 and up are steel.
correct.
And that's personally what I recommend anyway, just to get a little bit more weight up front on your arrow, and a little bit more durability. Aluminum's great. It's obviously, you wouldn't use it if it wasn't sturdy, but
Yeah,
steel is going to
yeah,
hold up a
it's
little bit
super
more.
strong.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's designed. There's plenty of ferrule there. It's strong enough to handle impacts. I shoot those into block walls too. Just they have to survive and do those things. But it's a torture test. I mean, that's all it is. Again, I'm not going to shoot something expect it to survive to where I can go
Right.
shoot it again. But I do expect it to not blow up, and
Yeah.
and that's one of the problems.
And then with the screw in as well, you've got for people that are whitetail hunters and want a bigger cut, is it 2 3/8?
2 3/8. Yeah, we call it the Whitetail Fury. It's actually 1 inch closed. And so, and again, our broadheads are different. I had a rep tell me the other day, a friend of mine, he says your broadheads defy logic. And one of the reasons is in looking at this. So people say, okay, why would I shoot your broadhead? Why would I shoot your broadhead over somebody else's broadhead? Or why would I shoot a mechanical over fixed? That's the biggest debate in the world, is mechanical fixed. Okay. Well, first thing is, that's like saying, a Ford F-150 or a Dodge Ram and a Ford Raptor. Okay. They're both trucks, but the Ford Raptor is just a different league. Now Dodge has their, I don't even know what it's called, but their
TRX.
truck that competes with that. But you can't just say mechanical and fixed, because there are so many different really good fixed blades and so many not good fixed blades. Same with mechanicals. But the one advantage that we have is there's no dull edges on this broadhead. Okay, so when you shoot it, it's a fixed bladed broadhead. Okay, so there's everybody that says, what if it fails? Okay, what if it fails? If this broadhead fails, you're shooting a fixed broadhead.
Mm-hmm.
End of discussion. And so we don't have failures. I'm sure, I mean, anything mechanical will fail at some point. But if you're taking a broadhead and you're saying, okay, it's all about your good shots, well, that's what you're shooting. You're shooting a fixed bladed broadhead. Broadheads are not about your good shots. Broadheads are about your bad shots. Any broadhead kills if you shoot it through the lungs and the heart. And if somebody tells you I shot it through the heart and it didn't die because the broadhead failed, they're lying.
You can shoot a field point through the heart.
Yes, you can. So
you shouldn't. I'm not recommending that, guys.
No,
don't think I'm saying that.
You
don't
shouldn't.
do that.
There's a story that I know that had happened before.
Well, I killed a squirrel this year with that because we were at camp and they were just he was messing with our garbage. So I was like, and I was just sighting in my bow. I was like, hey kids, watch this, and I just pop, and it was pegged to the ground. It was gone.
I'll make this long story short. A good friend of mine's a big time outfitter. And they had a client sitting in a blind. Bull came in, 400 plus bull. Shot at him, missed him, 22 yards. The client was sick. The outfitter was sick. It's like, oh man, that's too bad. So he's like, well, I got another spot. And he's like, no, I'm going to sit here. I want to shoot this bull. And he's like, I don't think that bull's coming back.
Yeah.
So he's like, okay, but I'm going to sit here anyway because I missed him. This is where I'm going to sit. Next evening, the bull came back. He missed him again at 27 yards. So, and it was like, you got to be kidding me. And he's like, I missed. I shot right over him, and I missed. And he's like, okay, well, we're going to put you in a different spot. And he's like, nope, I'm going to sit here. This is my punishment. I am going to sit here. And if this bull doesn't come back, that's fine. I'm going to sit here. So he did. Next day, bull comes back. He shoots it. Guy comes in, the outfitter comes in, and he's like, I made the shot. He was at 25 yards, came in the same spot. I center punched him, got him. He's like, high five, doing the whole thing. He's like, when did you shoot him? He's like, an hour ago. He's like, okay. He goes, let me go look for the arrow and we'll do. And when he went and looked for the arrow, he found the arrow, and the guy had shot him with a field point. Walked over the hill. Bull was dead, 150 yards. He center punched him. He shot him right through the heart. And so, he was just excited. He was just, I couldn't, and just didn't. Why he had a field point in his quiver, and again, that's, I don't know the person. I don't know, what happened, but yeah, it's a story and stuff like that happens.
He's lucky.
But yeah, he got lucky. I mean, he 100% got lucky. And just crazy stuff. But
yeah. Don't do that, guys.
Don't do that. No. Don't ever carry a field point in the field with you.
Yeah, exactly.
You should not do that. That is bad. So
yeah, there's been multiple times I wish I had one for a squirrel that was chirping or something
tree,
like that.
Chirping in a tree or whatever.
I'm like, this arrow's not worth you. But
yeah, there's always that.
Oh yeah. So. But the so going back to the mechanical, you were highlighting a couple things, but I want to say, because for me, I was all on the fixed wagon for a while. I've run through a couple different fixed heads. I'm all about it. I get it. There's definitely a place for them. And I was hearing all these horror stories about mechanicals. Then I realized, I'm like, yeah, but those people aren't me. And I know my abilities and I know where to aim with a mechanical. I'm not going to aim at the knuckle of the humorist. Like that's not the smart thing to do. And so I've reverted now to where I keep 2, because I've got a tight spot on the majority of my bows. So it's 5 arrows. I've got 3 mechanicals and 2 fixed, and the 2 fixed are for frontal shots if it presents itself. And I've set certain boundaries on myself for that. But like a frontal shot and I won't shoot a hard quartering 2, to be honest with you. That just That's
Because
one
it's
of
all
my
shoulder and front.
yeah,
Right.
it's one of the worst shots in my opinion that you could take
Right.
anatomically. A frontal, I'll take that over a
Oh yeah.
hard quartering 2 all day.
Yeah.
But then the mechanicals, so like what you were saying, and this is, people talk about if they fail. Well, this isn't like a little field point on the front or a little chisel tip. This is, I mean, just a, it looks like a mini iron will for people that aren't watching this. It's a 1-inch cut.
Yeah, it's 3/4 by 3/4 closed.
Yep.
So I mean, literally, you're shooting a 4-bladed, almost slick trick style broadhead. And in a mechanical broadhead, I mean, there's 3 places that people shoot stuff, and they shoot them in the shoulder, they shoot them in the guts, and they shoot them through the lungs. Yeah, there's other places that you can hit, but let's just call those the 3 majority places. A mechanical broadhead, unless you're shooting the right poundage or anything like that, nothing's going to get through the shoulder, so nothing's going to help you. And you'll get arguments from guys that say if you shoot, a single bevel, this, that, whatever, through the shoulder. I've seen elk get shot in the shoulder with heavy pounded single bevel broadheads, and they just stop them. And I'm not talking about smaller deer or coos deer or white-tailed deer or anything like that. But if you gut shoot an animal with a single bevel broadhead, they don't do enough damage. They penetrate, but they don't do enough damage. That's what started me in designing broadheads. Is I settled on slick trick when I was hunting. I got out of archery. I started as a young age. I got out of it and got back into it. And I physically watched a guy shoot a deer 40 yards with a slick trick, great broadhead, super sharp, 4-bladed. I physically watched that deer run over a mile because it didn't do any damage. It didn't know it was hurt. And so one of the best emails we ever get is somebody telling us, I made a bad shot and your broadhead saved me. And that's what it does. I mean, you have tournament archers, okay? Best shots in the world, right? You get, and name any of them. And you'll hear them say, you need to practice and you need to shoot more and you got to be a better shot and all this. Yet every single one of them shoot fat shouts in Vegas. Why? Because it helps. It opens up their margin for error. If they really believed in becoming a better archer, every one of them would shoot X10s in Vegas because you shoot a little bitty shaft. But a big shaft helps you grab lines. That's why they're called line cutters. A broadhead does the same thing. So if you shoot a little bitty broadhead, your margin for error is really small.
Yep.
But
exactly.
Again, you want to shoot something that does what you want it to do.
Exactly.
And I believe we've achieved that.
Yeah, and that's why. So like for me, with the elk, and this is something I recommend people do before you get in the field, not when you're excited about the shot, not when you're seeing that big old bull, or even the one that for me that's a good bull. I was stoked about
Any
it,
bull with a
and
bow is a good bull.
I mean, it was my first bull. I was super stoked about it, and he was bedded and slightly quartering 2, but not too bad. It was pretty much broadside, and I had set certain yardage that I was okay with, those 70 yards. And know your own stuff. It doesn't matter how far you shoot the animal, but know it before you go into the field. Set those standards. And I had set the standard of when do I pull a mechanical and when do I pull a fixed. And in this moment, he was bedded, so I was like, okay, just thinking of the anatomy of it. I'm like, it's all scrunched together. His rib cage is scrunched together. His shoulder blades are tucked up. I mean, it's almost like an armored plate. Yeah. If I was to try to aim for a double lung or a heart shot at that point, it was almost impossible. So I purposefully aimed for the back rib with him quartering to me. Obviously, it was going to exit liver and maybe nick some guts. I knew that was my shot, and that's the shot I felt more comfortable with rather than hugging the shoulder when he was all scrunched up and basically a tank at the front.
Right.
And so that's, I whipped out the mechanical, and like if people have listened to the story, great. If not, here you go. Spoiler alert, the elk went 30 yards. and
It's right behind
laid
you.
back down. Yeah, exactly. Spoiler alert. Yeah, he ran 30 yards and laid back down. Didn't know what hit him. Had no idea I was there. And his little spike buddy hung out for like 45 minutes. Didn't know what the heck just happened. And then he
But he
finally
laid
walked
back
off.
down because he was
Yeah,
injured. That's
exactly.
why.
Yep,
Yeah, it
exactly.
did damage, and he was like, "Oh, this doesn't feel good."
Exactly.
Yep.
So that was the thing, is that, you know, I was okay with taking that a little bit further back shot because I knew I was going to get a 2-inch destructo hole through
Right.
him. And it did. It really did. When we opened him up, like, it was just, I mean, it was carnage. And so, you know, we had that. And then the whitetail, she was hard quartered away, which I like quartering away shots. You've got a lot
Yeah.
more access to the good stuff that is going to help the animal die quicker. And so, you know, I took that shot and it slid in because I try and aim for the exit whenever I'm looking at an animal. I'm trying to remember that. And so I was aiming for the opposite shoulder.
Right.
And it ended up sliding in just like the front end of one of the tenderloins, basically. And it rode the ribs and the spine all the way through her pump house and then poked out the opposite side. And because the way she was quartered or whatever, the arrow didn't go all the way through, but the broadhead was out the other end.
Oh, okay.
And that was with a 2 3/8 inch cut. I don't know how I missed all the guts, because when I mean, she ran like 15 yards, tried to go uphill and toppled over. And so we walk up to her. One of my buddies was there. He was getting ready to go into the stand, and he's like, he looks at it. He's like, "That's gonna be fun to clean."
Yeah, they do create a mess.
It
definitely
looked
create a
bad
mess.
from the shot, like from where the fletchings were poking out. But when we opened her up, it had not touched any of the guts. I don't know how that happened.
Sweet.
That's
pretty sweet.
Yeah, and I mean, both lungs had a big old 2 3/8 inch slash through it. Like, it was awesome what it did. And on that one, I think because it cut 3 ribs horizontally, and so I guess perpendicular to the ribs, it cut 3 ribs. So the blades were bent, like you were saying, but they weren't broken, which I thought was pretty cool. And that's probably what ended up slowing down the full pass through.
When you get in and start cutting ribs especially down the rib cage, it definitely takes its toll on kinetic energy. That's for sure.
Right. But even it was 40 plus yards, had gone all the way through the body cavity, and still went through 3 ribs perpendicular, not sliding in between them, but like cut them at a 90-degree angle, 3 ribs. That's impressive. And so with my own use of it, I mean, those will be the mechanicals that I use going forward. It's something that I recommend to people because, like you said, even if it does fail, even if for some reason the blades don't open or whatever, you still have that much cut going through an animal. That one way and then that the other way, even if they don't open.
Right. I mean, and they are. I mean, and that's the thing. And if you don't, if you're shooting based on failure, you're going in the wrong idea anyway. I mean, you really are. You
Another
really have to
alert. Shoot better.
Shoot better. Hey,
Practice.
Stuff happens. I mean, that's the biggest thing about hunting. I mean,
right.
I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were talking about, do you think, he works in an archery shop, and he had a guy come in. He's like, "Hey, I made this shot, and I made a perfect shot, and the arrow didn't penetrate well, and this, that, and another." It's like, okay, how far was the shot? 80 yards. Okay, first thing is, 80 yards, that's cool. I have no problem with that in any way, shape, or form. But you cannot tell me you made a perfect shot at 80 yards because it's just too far away to tell.
Mm-hmm.
And which brought up this conversation of a friend of mine that he hunts Texas, and he hunts Mexico, and he hunts Africa, and he hunts all over the world. And he kills 200 plus animals a year. And about five or 6 years ago, and he films a lot of his hunts, he decided that he was going to document where he thought he shot the animal comparative to where he actually hit the animal. So as soon as he made a shot, animal ran off, he documented, I think I made this shot and the animal was standing this direction. he was wrong 75% of the time. And it's just stuff happens. I mean, I shot a buck in Texas. He was quartering to me. And so he had his front left shoulder towards me, 32 yards, had his head down. I shot. I hit him here in the back on the other side because he spun, took off, and I hit him in the spine on the other side. So it's really crazy that how fast an animal can move and what happens. I shot my bull this year, 50 yards, 55 yards actually. I guessed him at 50 and I shot him at 55. Cut a rib going out the other side, didn't hit a rib going in, and we never did find the arrow. I mean, we had 3 people look the next day in the daylight for 45 minutes and couldn't find the arrow. So, and I heart shot him. I'm not a heart shot guy. That's not what I shoot for. I shoot for center lungs, center mass. I think it's the smartest shot. They can't breathe. They can't go anywhere. And so I'm a lungs guy, not a heart shot guy, but, got lucky and only judged him by 5 yards. So,
which, and that goes into, like, I joke and say shoot better. I'm not any Levi Morgan or anything like that, guys. Don't, I'm not being cocky. I'm being sarcastic in a way, to a certain degree. Like, yes, go out and practice. I recommend practice at distance, shoot your broadheads before you get in the field so you know how they're hitting. And like with that guy that shot at 80, like there's so much that can happen at 80 yards unless you're shooting in an open field. There's so much that could happen, and you could have possibly not got pinned, because even this arrow with this, and we'll get into this broadhead, which is the fixed one, the Dr. Jekyll, or I guess just Jekyll, but we'll call it Dr. Jekyll. This one, even with those 4 blades, if your arrow's coming in, say the animal's here, and your arrow comes in here and like bounces that way because it's, whatever, it hits something, it's nicked something, it's coming in like a torpedo,
a tree
whatever,
branch or whatever the situation may be.
It's not going to penetrate. So at that point, it's tuning and not the broadhead, right?
Correct.
If you're hitting an animal sideways, your broadhead's not going to penetrate. It's just going to give them a little scratch. So that's the other thing too that you got to think about, and why this mechanical is such for my in my opinion and my usage of it. It's the best option to alleviate and give you some, I guess, forgiveness on both ends, where if the mechanical fails, there's still basically a 1-inch cut, 3/4 each way,
right,
of the mechanical. And that's a lot of cutting edge if it does fail. And if it doesn't fail, you're getting the 2-inch cut of a mechanical blade. Right. And so that cannot be, instead of getting that full draw and be like, oh man, I'm really worried I'm using this mechanical, like all the things that are going through your head when you're at full draw, you don't want to be worried about your equipment and what you're doing. You want to be able to pick a spot on the animal and let that arrow go and go through your shot process.
I've told people that for years. The last thing you want to be thinking about at full draw is what you're shooting.
Exactly.
It really does. And that's one of the things, I mean, penetration wise, we do out penetrate, I believe, every other mechanical on the market. And one of the reasons is because our broadheads deploy on entry, not impact. So what that means is, and we'll go back to it, these points cut. So when they hit the hide, they're cutting, and what happens is the animal's hide slides between these, and that's what drives them open. That's why they're curved. They want to follow the skin back or follow the meat back, just like a curved blade that you cut meat with in your house.
Yeah.
So you don't lose the penetration. There's, other broadheads on the market that have little wings that stick out, and that when it hits those, that deploys a blade. Well, when it hits those and has to do something, that's what creates drag. Slide back, flip over, it doesn't matter. And I can name them all, but when they hit and they have a blunt edge, that's what creates the drag on the arrow.
Yeah.
The second part of that is when you have a blunt edge, and I found this out kind of a different way back when I was making the Gravedigger broadheads. People ask, why do your broadheads fly so good? Well, one of the reasons is they don't have a blunt edge on them. So they cut the wind. We were going to make practice blades way back when. So we just took practice broadheads, or took the blades and had them sent over that weren't sharp. Well, they wouldn't fly. Well, the reason they wouldn't fly is because that blunt edge doesn't cut the wind. And so when you have a blunt edge on a broadhead, instead of it being sharp, razor sharp or whatever you want to call it, you have a 30 thousandths thick broadhead, or blade that's trying to cut the wind, and that hinders accuracy. It just does. And so that's why, at the TAC events, we had people come off. We had an 80-yard target set up, and guys would come off and they say, well, how do they fly? It's like, go shoot them. And they're like, well, really? And it's like, yeah, go shoot the fixed blade. Go shoot the Jekyll. And they wouldn't believe it until they shot it. And then they started shooting it, and they're like, okay, now I get this.
Yep.
So they really do. And one of the things that Nick Fisher, owner of AAE, and I laugh about a lot is people say, well, do you have to broadhead tune them? Okay. If you have to broadhead tune, and this is a spoiler, if you have to broadhead tune, your bow's setup is not correct. You should be able to screw a quality broadhead on and shoot it. It should not be. And whether the broadhead's not good, your bow's not set up, your arrow spine's not correct, your bow's not in tune, something's wrong. Because with our broadhead, if your bow's tuned and your arrow setup is correct, you screwed it on, you can shoot it. It will hit where your field points hit.
Oh, for sure.
You get to a certain distance, they're gonna start hitting lower because there's more drag.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's and that usually doesn't happen until past 80 yards.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so with that, let's segue here into your fix. So still not quite talking about the glue end, even though this is the glue end system. But here is the fixed head. So this is the Jekyll. And
right.
So it's got that same cutting head on the front there, and then it's got the swept back blades, which I really like that design of the swept back blade because, like what you were saying, it allows it to slide through. Just like your knives, your culinary knives and knives that you're using it's not a straight blade that you're using unless you're cutting open boxes.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, unless you're going to open boxes. Exactly. Yeah. And one of the reasons that we sharpen the front blade all the way around and we sharpen that blade, the Jekyll blade, all the way around is because if you don't get a complete pass through, you want that broadhead working for you as it's in there. If it's working its way back out, people that shoot lower poundages, people that aren't going to get pass-throughs, trad people, Brandon Lilly shoots that, Schneider shoots that, those guys, because if they don't get a pass-through, that arrow's still working. It's still doing its job coming back out.
I wouldn't want that thing in me if you're running.
No. I've told people. Yeah. I've told people if you shoot them with a Jekyll and it stays in there, it's dead because it's going to cut them up.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's pretty cool, and I like it. So this is something that, this is the one that I've got in my quiver as my fixed head. And what's cool about this system, guys, is that you can take these out and replace them with the mechanical blades as well.
Correct.
And this is going more into the glue-in system as well, because once you've glued it in, you don't want to necessarily have to, pull it out.
Correct.
You can, but you don't want to have to.
And that's the thing. And that's why the impact point, and I'll grab both heads so you can see them. The impact points are the same because aerodynamically they're the same. And that's one of the things when it has a lot to do with the ferrule design of how your broadhead flies. And so if you take an iron will that has an X side ferrule and X blades, and then you take a Rage mechanical and you put the two together, their ferrules are completely different. Their blade design is completely different. And so they're not going to hit the same spot. Where these are basically, they're the same design, just interchangeable, which creates a fixed and mechanical broadhead that hit the same spot. And that's important to me. I carry both. I'm a mechanical guy, but I have had opportunities where I knew I was going to have to shoot through brush. And shooting a mechanical through brush is bad. It is not good. Don't do it, because they catch things, and then you get more deflection. You can squeeze a fixed through some brush, and that's why I carry a fixed. Is, if I need to shoot it, as the first shot, or if I didn't make a great shot and an animal's bedded, because they're always going to try to bed in brush or trees or something like that, and I need to get another arrow in it, then that's why I carry both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And they hit the same spot, so
yeah,
I don't have to worry about it.
And with the glue ends too, so like if you're worried about practicing with your mechanicals, you can just use the fixed head as your practice, and then get that set up, and they'll fly very similar, if not the same. And that's by design. And so I really like that. Again, this is so let's, I guess, transition back to the glue end system.
Okay.
So and I asked you about this because, again, I'm a kind of that overbuilt, trying to make sure there's no failure points kind of guy. So I was asking about the aluminum collars versus the steel.
Right.
And you explained to me, and I guess let's talk to people about, actually, you know what, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start here from the front. So this is the fixed, this is the mechanical glue in, and then the field point.
Okay.
We'll grab the field point. So they all weigh the same, and I guess we can
They'll
start
weigh the same.
Within
a couple grains. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So there is the 150 and the 175, correct?
Correct. Okay. With a 10 grain collar or a 30 grain collar.
Right. So you can mix and match those however you want. The 10 grain collar is this one right here.
Yep.
Which is the aluminum.
Yep.
And then the 30 grain collar is the steel one that you were showing.
Correct.
So you can do 180 grains up front, 185, which is what I have here.
Yep, and then that's the system I shoot. The 185.
And then you can do 20 grains more than that, so you can do 205.
Correct.
If you want.
You can do down to 160.
Yep. Exactly.
Which 160, and a lot of people think about that, 160, it's so heavy. Well, if you shoot a regular Victory VAP or most other 166 arrows, you're shooting a 50 grain outsert.
Mm-hmm. And then
so if you shoot a 50 grain outsert with a 100 grain broadhead, you're shooting 150 grains. 10 grains is not going to make a difference. It's not going to break down your arrow anymore, and you're going to get a lot stronger system out of it.
Yep, exactly.
So you have to think, and archery shops are notorious for this, because that's all they've known forever is, what do you shoot? 100 grain, 125s. Okay. And those were the two options, even 85s, which nobody should ever shoot an 85 grain broadhead. And we'll get into a whole different discussion with that.
Those are just field points. I use those for my
so
yeah.
But and guys say, and I deal with this, and I talk to you about this at the shows. People came up to us at, we did Hunt Expo last year for the first time, and they came up to us and they said, I shoot 100 grain broadhead and I cannot get my arrows to fly past 40 yards. It's like, okay, tell me about your setup. Mm-hmm. He's like, well, archery shop set it up, and this is what I got going. And I'm like, okay, great. He's shooting FMJs, full size 244 arrows with a 100 grain broadhead. And I said, well, the first thing is you have no front of center, 0. I mean, it was low. It's probably 6%. Because the arrow weighs so much. FMJs are super heavy, super strong arrow. Don't get me wrong, but they're super heavy. And then he had, a 15 grain aluminum insert put in there with a 100 grain broadhead. So I said, tell you what, it was the first day of the show. I said, tell you what, I will give you a 125 grain broadhead that I have here. I said, and you can go home and shoot it, and I will guarantee you it will fly better. And he's like, why? And I said, because it's going to give you some front of center. Now, I believe, and we're building arrows now, and you can check that out on the website, but I believe your arrow should be 14.5 to 18% front of center. Anywhere in there. If you have less than that, you're going to lose some things, maybe gain some things in speed. Over that, you're going to lose some things, maybe, gain some things in weight. So there's gives and takes, but this is kind of the happy medium. And how I've tested this, and people say, oh, front of center, it's a gimmick or whatever it is. It's not. I mean, Missiles are based on, when they fly a missile, it's based on how much front of center they have. It's not a joke. At 100 yards, I shot two different arrows, over and over, not just one time. But both arrows one was 442 grains and one was 443 grains. Okay. One was 18% front of center and one was 10% front of center. And in that, the one that was 18% front of center at 100 yards shot 8 inches higher than the other arrow. And what it did is that front of center kept it going and kept it in the air longer because it was more efficient. The vanes didn't take over the arrow. So basically, that's how I started playing with front of center and where we're at now. I think I lost you video-wise.
No, you're good. Sorry, my camera was acting up. But no, yeah, so that's interesting to know about missiles. I didn't realize that. So playing with front of center, I'm trying to think of I haven't really ever measured it. I just go off of kind of point weight.
Right.
And that is something too, like you were saying, going 10 grains more isn't really going to break down the spine. So for people thinking, about that, or maybe just getting into archery, going from like a 350 to a 300, 10 grains isn't going to be a ton, but, upping it 20 to 30 grains more, you may have to drop a spine to make it stiff.
Correct. Yeah. And your spine weight, I mean, it's you and I talked about Victory's arrows. So a VAP TKO versus a regular Victory VAP. A regular Victory VAP, it's hard to say. A 300 spine and a 350 spine TKO weigh the same. So when you talk about, what your front of center is, it does have to do with your grains per inch of your arrow. Back to the full metal jackets. I believe they're almost 12 and a half grains per inch in a 244. Wow. Where, a Victory VAP's 9 grains an inch. So you end up you can play with your weight up front. The heavier arrow you shoot, if you're trying to maintain a front of center, your overall arrow weight's going to go up because your arrow weighs more. So, and to get your overall front of center up, then you have to add more weight. So it's something that you should look at and play with, but we have found 14.5, 18% right in there is usually really, really good.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. I could figure it out, I guess, to measure it, but I'm sure I'm somewhere in there.
With your arrows, I'm going to say you're right at 16.5% because I know your arrow build.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and for those wondering, I mean, the ones that I'm building. So this was a big deal for me. I went away from, so I shot 4mm. I like the arrow setup. I don't like the components unless it's a glue-in style system. And the only ones that really make that are Iron Will with the Snyder Core system, Valkyrie, and then now you. The other two systems, we'll just say Valkyrie is super heavy. It's a lot of, I mean, even at the lowest weight available for their full system is like 200 grains up front. That's their lowest. It starts there.
Right. It starts there.
Yeah, exactly. So that's that for some people, that's a lot to swallow. I know for me, I had to jump up a spine going to that. I like the system for the durability factor of that center pin, et cetera, the glue-in style, without it being a full glue-in. So but it's just heavy. And then the Iron Will, I haven't messed around with it. I know it's very pricey, for what it is. But I know I trust Bill. He's a good guy. I know he makes a good system. But it doesn't allow for anything other than like the 2-blade broadheads, which if you're sold on that, awesome. I'm not so much because of I know it does damage on the inside, but I also want to be able to track the animal in case I do have, like the shot that I had on my bull. A 2-blade broadhead would not have done the damage, and I would not have felt comfortable making the shot that I made with the mechanical with a 2-blade. I just
Right.
wouldn't have felt comfortable doing that. And so who knows? I may not have gotten a bull because of that. Because there was no way for me to get closer to him, and there was
Right.
not
You wouldn't have taken the shot based on
exactly.
what you had. Right. And you may
Exactly.
not have gotten
Because
another opportunity. Right.
and something that some people may not even realize, and it kind of hit me the other day. I can't remember who I was listening to talk about this, and I think I brought it up to you when we were on the phone the other day. But if you have, so like you've got the layer of skin here, and then you have the muscles here, they're attached, but they're not. It's not like a fixed system that they move together. The skin
Yes.
can move separately from the muscle. It's not like it moves way off, but it'll move separately. So if you cut a 2-blade hole in that, and then the muscle decides to move this way, what happens? You don't get the blood trail. It's still doing damage on the inside, right? But you're not
Right.
getting the blood trail that you can track the animal if you need to, which most of the time you do have to track at a certain distance. And so that's a big reason why I'm not the biggest fan of a 2-blade for me personally. Again, some people that may work wonders, but for me, that's what's really sold me on your gluing system, and why I'm going to run 4 millimeters again, is because I love the componentry. I don't know how far down the shaft it actually goes. Do you have one outside of the shaft that you could show?
Yeah. The 175 goes, I believe it's 1 3/4 inches, and the 150 is a little under 1.5 inches.
Okay, so that goes probably to about here or so.
Yeah. Yep. So
then-
that collar is about 5/8 of an inch.
Okay, yeah. So about there is where the center pin is, which that's
Mhm.
reinforcing the shaft, which
Mm-hmm.
a 4 millimeter shaft, especially like a 350 or 300 spine, is going to have a thick wall to begin with. So it's
Mhm.
pretty durable arrow. Plus you've got the center pin that goes down that way, and that's reinforcing the arrow. And then you've got the collar, which this is usually the weak point. So I guess talk to us about that and walk us through why you're okay with aluminum here, where
Yes.
right now a lot of people are preaching steel or titanium for collars and nothing
Well,
else.
and I think what happens is when you talk about, we'll do this. We'll do it this way. So when you talk about a screw-in broadhead versus a glue-in, okay. So a collar is going to go down a certain amount. So we'll play with this. We'll just stop this at the end of the arrow. Okay. So let's say the victory collar. So it slides on about 1/2 inch. So it will slide down, but the collar sticks out about this far. Okay. So when you screw in a broadhead, that broadhead is stopping where the shaft is. Okay. So you have a pivot point of right at the end of the shaft and the end of the broadhead. Okay. It can bend right there because there's nothing there. There's no structure there other than the aluminum collar. And that's where aluminum collars bend,
Right.
you know, which when they tried to do deep six, they put like a hit insert and they slid it inside the broadhead like this, or inside the arrow. But then they made this part weak, your shank, because they made it so small it had to fit inside here. It had to be 166.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which means they had to go to a smaller thread. Okay, so then you had that same weak point pivot point. Okay, and you also had it inside the arrow. So the broadhead or the arrow itself is not meant to take lateral pressure. Okay, so now let's apply this with a glue in. So now you're taking a glue in and you're sliding it that far into your arrow. Okay, so where's your pivot point? Is it here or is it here? Well, if it's here, now you have this much structure of arrow in front of it. Now, if we take this and we slide that on, and we slide that in, this is no longer a pivot point either because it has structure here. This isn't going to bend because it's hardened steel. And the other pivot point is back here. Okay. So it takes your pivot points out of it. It makes everything spin cleanly because arrows are built from the inside out. They're built on mandrels. So they're really long things steel pieces that are 166, and they wrap the carbon around it, and that's how they're built. So the outside diameter changes based on how much carbon and what kind of carbon they use. So that's why we have a whole pile of different colors up here, because every manufacturer has a different size or a different style or a different wrap or a different carbon, high modular carbon, low modular carbon. High modular carbon gold tip is, is known for that high modular carbon that they use, but it's a thinner wall broad or arrow because it's a higher modular carbon.
Makes it more brittle.
They can be more brittle. Super straight, really strong on impact. So those are the things you have to do. People ask about our collars. They're all sized. Like, let's say, like this arrow, this is a 235 BAB TKO. So its actual OD is 252. This collar is 254.
235.
This is a 235.
Ooh, that's a heavy arrow.
This is a thick arrow. Yeah, it just happens to be in the office, so that's
yeah.
why.
Well, they just came out with a 170.
I don't know what they came out. Yeah, no, I haven't seen that one yet.
Oh my gosh, when I saw that,
but
I was
that has to do with the 80-pound bow.
Well, yeah, that and the people like friggin' Derek Wolf that have a 36-inch draw length,
right?
Whatever,
So you can use the collars anywhere up to four decimal points higher. So at 252, if we made a 256, you could use that collar because a human hair is 2 thousandths thick. Your red hair may be 3 thousandths thick.
Yeah.
But so
I think it's thinner because there's no soul to it.
Oh, is that what it is? Is that what it is? No color pigment.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can go, but you don't want it to be exact because you end up having to sand the shaft and do that stuff. So you always go the next size up. And in all the arrows that are made, we tried to cover almost everybody's. There's a few that we're kind of lacking on. But especially in the smaller spines, the 400, 500 spine arrows. But yeah, that's how the system works. That's why it works. You're taking all the pivot points out of them, and that's what makes them so strong.
Yeah, and so for people that are concerned about it, it's with that explanation, made me comfortable with putting aluminum here because I'm not gonna lie, I was a little concerned. I was like, I trust you, Dale, but like my brain is saying that there shouldn't be any aluminum on my arrow.
Right.
Yeah. But
and that structure, because you're the only thing that would do anything to this aluminum that's on an impact, and it would blow it up and trust me, I shot it in a block wall. It won't blow it apart. No, and there's nowhere for it to bend because there's a shaft and an arrow shaft in it. So there's no place for it to structurally bend.
So it's more if you have like half certs or out certs, that's where aluminum is.
That's where you start to get the bending. Yes, when you get pivot points inside of them.
Yeah, it's kind of like with my idea of like I don't want aluminum on the ferrule.
Correct.
Right. That's more of a spot that could possibly. Yeah.
Gotcha. That could be your deal.
No, that makes sense. Cool. I guess a question that I've been asked, and I guess I'll ask you for the person that asked me, and I kind of had this thought too. I know green is your color.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other? Because I know you can't just leave raw aluminum, right, to make it silver like you do with the stainless. But do you have any other color ideas coming out, or are we sticking with green because that's the evolution?
We're sticking with green for now. I know Nick hates me for it because it's one of the hardest colors to anodize. And so black would be way easier, for sure. But we might do some colors in black, just because. But green, I think, is what we're going to stick with.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It stands out, and it gets people asking, what is that? Because there are other collars in different colors. And so but I love it. It's a solid system, and this is what I'm going to be running with my 4mm. I need to find a lighted knock now that I can trust for 4mm shaft, but that's the other component that's lacking for
Yes,
4mm
it
arrows.
is.
I understand it's hard to make, but I won't lie, it's cool to watch a video with a lighted nock
May
in it.
not be that far away.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Oh, all right. I know. So like, I love the Halo nocks. I love the Halo nocks. And that's what I use right now currently for my 5mm arrows that I run lighted nocks on. But I just haven't, I haven't found a lighted nock that works for 4mm. So you've intrigued me now.
So stand
we'll
by.
have to stand by, he says. You it's like you know somebody that makes
I know a
nocks.
guy. I know a guy.
I think I know this guy too. He's a pretty cool dude.
You might. Yeah.
No, that's cool. Is there anything else on these on this system that you want to maybe highlight or bring up for people while we're on the subject?
No, I mean, we're just trying to make the best system that can help people. I mean, that's all it is. I mean, our customer service, I believe, is second to none. We are, a direct to consumer based company, but we are not opposed to going into archery shops. We've had a lot of archery shops as we're growing. Ask and we do offer good margins for them. So if they're interested or your archery shop's interested, and we're not opposed to that. No, other than that, we've been growing, and thanks to guys like you and everybody else that's been shooting them. My biggest thing is I never say we don't have a retention problem, because once you shoot them, most people really like them. We have an eyeball problem, and the more people that know about us and give us an opportunity, I think you'll be happy with what you do.
Exactly. No, I agree. It's one of those things that kind of gets rid of the idea that mechanicals have those problems with failures. It definitely boosted my confidence in it, and taking, like I said, that shot. I mean, it was a very steep downhill. It's probably, I don't know, 25, 30 degrees downhill on a bedded bull at 70 yards. I think line of sight, when I was looking at it, line of sight distance was over 80. So
Okay.
the cut was pretty steep. And it was a great shot. Like I said, bull didn't run 30, and it went clean through and buried into the dirt behind him. So that was a testament for me. If there were any doubts before that, they were gone. So I highly recommend this for people. I'm going to leave a link down below where you guys can check out these broadheads. And the system, the gluing system's fairly new. I'm going to be, like I said, running it. It's going to build my confidence back up in the 4mm arrows, because I love those arrows. Just didn't like the components, and now I do. So
cool. No, I was glad to have you on board.
Yeah.
It's been a fun ride, and it's just going to get better. It really is.
Sure. Well, cool. Well, Dale, where can they find you? And I'll leave those links down below where they can find you and reach out to you with any questions.
They can find us at evolutionoutdoors.com. It's with an S, outdoors. And then The Evolution Outdoors on Facebook and Instagram.
Awesome.
And sign up for our emails, because we do some stuff for subscribers that we don't offer to anybody else. And
Awesome.
So yeah.
There you go. Well, if you guys are looking for a new broadhead, or even if you're not, I recommend going and picking up a couple of them and messing around with them this year, whether it be the screw ends, or if you're brave enough to start messing around with the glue in systems and get confident with that, then I definitely recommend that as well. Dale, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And guys, like I always say, get out, live your life, and love it.
Absolutely.